Hi, everybody. My name is Tiffany, and I'm here today to talk to you about all things thyroid inflammation, why you're still tired, puffy, and stuck, and what you can do about it. We always need to have some options for some solutions. So, before I get going, I just want to give you a little idea about who I am. So, my name is Tiffany. I'm a board certified and licensed nutritionist. Prior to this, I used to teach anatomy, physiology, and biology. And then I was plagued with all the symptoms of thyroid symptoms, all kinds of issues with fatigue. Fatigue was my worst thing, depression, anxiety, all kinds of things that struggled and struggled for 20 plus years. And then I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. That was the catalyst to help me to see that I needed to dig deeper if I actually wanted to feel and function better rather than just sort of be alive. I wanted to actually thrive, and I was able to do that with looking down into root cause nutrition. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today and to help you feel and function better. All right, so we need to look at inflammation as sort of the core of what's going on here for your thyroid and your whole entire body. Why it happens, how to detect it, and how to heal it. Okay, so let's first talk about how inflammation impacts thyroid function. So there is an actual direct impact on the thyroid gland. Chronic inflammation damages thyroid tissue. This is why it can take years, sometimes 20 years, for people to be actually diagnosed with something like Hashimoto's or Graves' disease, just anything that can flag some kind of dysfunction in your thyroid. And when we have this, we impair our thyroid function, and then we are not able to actually convert the thyroid hormone to help us feel energetic, have good satiety, have good motivation, good mental health. It affects absolutely everything in our body. So when we have this chronic inflammation that's impacting the function, we are now susceptible to things with foods that we eat, food sensitivities and gut imbalances and things like that. So we need to dial that in as well. So when we talk about hormone conversion, what I'm referring to is looking at our main hormone, which is T4. That provides about 80% of our thyroid hormone, but it is actually considered inactive. And that needs to be converted into the active T3, which is only about 20% of what our body is made of or what we have. So that conversion process is something that is affected when you have this chronic inflammation. And this inflammation can come from stress. It can come from blood sugar dysregulation. It can come from poor food choices. It can come from drinking too much alcohol, no sleep, things like that. It could just all impact the amount of inflammation in our body. So this could be happening at any given time. So one of the things that happens with this conversion is that instead of converting from T4 into the active, helpful T3, we convert instead into something called reverse T3. And this blocks the receptor sites for T3 entering into our tissues and our cells. And the symptoms from this start to be fatigue, brain fog, cold intolerance, weight gain or weight loss resistance, and even if you're on medication, because most people are put on a Synthroid or a T4 type medication. And sometimes for a lot of people, in fact, that's just not enough. Okay, we have to help along that conversion so that you can have enough T3 to help you feel better. Now, when you have this chronic inflammation happening, this disrupts your cortisol regulation, and that further inhibits the thyroid to make T3. Okay, so this basically becomes like a cortisol resistance, and that blunts all of the anti-inflammatory pathways and just keeps this process going. It's just a vicious cycle. So what do we need to do with this? So I'm going to get more into this down the road here, but what we need to do is disrupt this inflammation process. We need to look at our symptoms and then actually respond to that and do something about it when it comes to food and lifestyle. All right, so the next point I want to make is that the root cause of inflammation in thyroid dysfunction, we need to dig into that a little bit more. And most times, from what I see in my practice, is gut issues. People have so many gut issues and they don't often have an actual diagnosis. Sometimes they have an autoimmune gut issue that's diagnosed. Other times they're just given sort of a blanket diagnosis of IBS. or something like that. And it does, but no results. They just tell people, or I'm sorry, no things to do about it. They're just told, maybe take an acid reducer like omeprazole or something over the counter or whatever. They're not really given tools to get to the why their gut is has a problem. So one of the things I see when I do gut testing, and honestly, I do gut testing a lot, and it tells so many things. But what I see is when we have this molecule called zonulin that is elevated, it's a protein that opens up the gaps in our GI tract, and it can trigger an immune response, and that can, depending on food intolerances and things, attack your thyroid tissue. Okay, so this dysbiosis creates systemic inflammation, and then if you also have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is hard to get treatment for or hard to even get a diagnosis, you are in a state of chronic and systemic inflammation. And about 70%, 70 to 80% of your immune system lives in your gut. It has its very own nervous system. We call it our second brain. So if you have food sensitivities, this is another part of this. If you have food sensitivities and various triggers, that can just keep that inflammatory process happening. And the worst offender for thyroid dysfunction is gluten. There's something called molecular mimicry. And when that happens, because gluten is such a similar protein structure as thyroid tissue, it can actually cause your body to attack your own thyroid gland because it thinks that it thinks that the gluten is the thyroid, and the immune system has identified the thyroid as something that needs to be out of the body. It's considered a foreign body, and it's trying to attack it. That's where the damage comes to your thyroid over time. Also, there's a lot of triggers with dairy, soy, eggs. Sometimes nightshades for people can trigger hypersensitivity reactions. Sometimes they're delayed, so it's hard to identify exactly what that is. And then the other factor with this, and it's something I work with a lot, I have a continuous glucose monitor program called the Glucose Reset, and we're working through these and looking at real-time data for each individual. And it's pretty telling how glucose control really can impact, or I should say lack of glucose control can really impact the inflammation and cause the oxidative stress in the body, which is just damaging to our tissues, damaging to our cells. So other things that can cause inflammation and thyroid dysfunction are going to be toxins and environmental triggers. So think of the things that you're putting into your body, the things that you're cleaning with in your household, chemicals that you might, use to brush your teeth, like the fluoride and bromine and things like that that are in toothpaste, or the bromines more in different kinds of drinks and things like that. BPA, phthalates, heavy metals, things like that are all going to disrupt thyroid signaling. And if you have poor detox pathways, and then that kind of goes back up to gut health, if you're not eliminating every day, that can just be a burden. You're just recycling all of those environmental toxins. And that alone causes a burden on your liver, which really reduces hormone clearance of all the hormones. And it really puts a burden on the thyroid function. So it's really important to make sure to look at your environment and try to, gradually change into using cleaner products, getting, plastics out of your life as much as you possibly can. It's not easy. And just really making sure that your environment is as clean as possible, and then control some of the foods you're eating as well. And then if you have a chronic infection or a virus that's lingering, a lot of times that can trigger an autoimmune thyroid response or other things, actually other autoimmunities. But things like Epstein-Barr or the monovirus, that's often just lying dormant. Most of us have been exposed to that, but sometimes when we're under chronic stress, chronic inflammation, that will absolutely trigger sort of an uptick of those symptoms. Also, if you have things with the gut like H. pylori or Candida, tick-borne infections, this will contribute to that systemic inflammation. And basically, it's like your whole body is on fire and it's just not functioning properly. All right, so I'm going to go to the next thing here. Just going to pull up my other side of my notes. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is the symptoms of inflammatory thyroid dysfunction. And this is the stuff that people come to me for. These are the things that are so frustrating and kind of subtle. No one else kind of notices them. Somebody else thinks you look fine, you feel fine, but you don't. And here's what they are. A lot of times you're going to have puffiness in the face, eyelids, hands, and ankles, feet. That's very, very common. And that to me is one of my most frustrating symptoms. It has always been, still is, and it comes and goes for no apparent reason. It's hard to pinpoint what exactly causes it. I mean, there's some things that are obvious, but there are other things that are not. Joint pain, stiffness, and muscle weakness is very common. I think as far as muscle weakness go, I haven't really had the joint pain or stiffness, but the muscle weakness sometimes feels more due to just being ridiculously fatigued, more than actually feeling weak. Hair thinning, dry skin, brittle nails. If your nails break off and chip and crack and split, if your skin is always super dry, no matter how much moisturizer you can put on, it's soaking up every bit of it. If your hair is thinning, if your part is getting wider, if you feel like your hair breaks off, that is a very common sign of thyroid dysfunction. And another one is constipation and bloating. It is, I don't know any person I've done a gut panel on who has a thyroid condition that doesn't have major leaky gut and too low of stomach acid. And if you have too low of stomach acid, you're not digesting and breaking down your foods right. So you're just not going to feel well at all. So that is a very common physical symptom. Some neurological and mental health symptoms, and a lot of times we like to compartmentalize and act like one thing doesn't really affect the other. My thyroid affects my energy and my metabolism, so it must not affect my mental health. But that is just simply not true. I would say that was one of the big factors and big symptoms in my life when my thyroid was completely out of whack, not functioning. And then, of course, when I didn't have one and not on the right medications. So brain fog and forgetfulness. And a lot of times people will just pass this off as I'm getting older or I'm too busy or whatever. But it's truly a symptom of, some neurological symptom that's associated with thyroid dysfunction. Depression or anxiety that doesn't respond to meds. And I would say that was true to me. I would titrate up to the highest dose of an antidepressant or anti-anxiety and have to start over with another one because it just didn't really work. It would take the edge off a little bit, but I never really felt like I was any better whatsoever. It just was kind of a losing battle. And then if you have insomnia or you can't stay asleep or you wake up and you feel like you've not slept, even if you slept for, the opposite, if you're sleeping like 10, 12 hours in a row and you wake up and you feel like you've never slept, that's a problem. That's kind of due to that inflammatory thyroid dysfunction. Metabolic symptoms, these are the ones people really, really resonate with. They really get this. Weight gain despite eating clean, eating and exercising well, blood sugar instability and insulin resistance. So I would say I wouldn't say weight gain was as much of a factor for me, but it was weight loss resistance or blood sugar instability. I was never going to be diagnosed with anything related to my glucose levels, but my control of my blood sugar was very overreactive and caused a lot of symptoms that to me seemed like I had the flu or something like that happening to my body. Cold hands and feet because you have a low basal body temperature or a really low resting heart rate. That is a very common sign of metabolic symptoms. Everything just slows down. That's why your hair is not growing. That's why your skin doesn't turn over and it gets dry and flaky. That is because everything, even skin or cell turnover, is slower. Okay, everything is very, very sluggish. You might have on labs, you might have an elevated C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker. You might have an elevated homocysteine, which is another inflammatory marker. You might have antibodies to your thyroid. You will probably have high reverse T3 and low T3, free T3. And the nutrients that are commonly deficient. Probably the biggest clue is going to be your ferritin, which is your storage iron. I know I had chronically low ferritin levels and no one ever said a word about it. Not once was it ever brought up that I should really try to replenish my iron stores at all. And at the time, I just wasn't asking questions. Low vitamin D is another common one. Also, selenium and zinc. These are, I would say, less commonly tested, and they're not great for serum testing. You need to do more cellular level testing for selenium and zinc to get the full picture. But often that is really important because they help in the conversion of thyroid hormone, and zinc helps a little bit too with insulin sensitivity. So that's really important to have in there. Okay. The next one we're going to talk about is how to test and identify the inflammation. This is really kind of frustrating sometimes because this is where you have to kind of go out on your own sometimes to get the labs you actually need, even if it's just a baseline where you don't do it every time, but at least you know for yourself, or if you have someone like me look at it with you so it can help support your process, or at least just validate all the symptoms you're feeling, and then going to your doctor's office and getting the standard labs done and being told that everything is normal. There's probably nothing more frustrating with that because you know how horrible you feel, and you start to feel like you are a hypochondriac, or you're just lazy, or you're unmotivated. You start beating yourself up with it. It is not good. So it is good to get these labs. And if you need help on getting the actual labs you need, even if it's like kind of a one-time thing, reach out to me because I can help you get that. And I work with this all the time, so I can help you at least analyze them as well, and then help you get to a person who can give you medications should you need or whatever. But a lot of times it's just going to be about lifestyle and nutrition. That's a good place a lot of people can start. So some of the labs that might be considered basic and some might be considered advanced are going to be that high sensitivity CRP. That's that C-reactive protein. And on the labs, it looks like HS-CRP. That's usually how you see it. There's something called homocysteine and ferritin. And then you're going to want fasting insulin. That I know is not a standard lab. That is not, I don't know why, but it's not. So you'd have to really ask for that. But chances are you might get told that, your glucose is normal, your A1C is normal, so there's no need to do the fasting insulin. And often I see on labs where glucose and A1C are normal, but insulin can be really, really high. And that's a sign of a lot of inflammation happening. So get that checked. And then I highly, highly recommend looking at a GI panel. Like I said, I do this all the time. It shows so much. Even if people don't really think they have gut problems, they will see things. We tie things together and it totally makes sense. And they start feeling better within, 4 to 6 weeks when they put that protocol into play. And it makes such a difference and starts tamping down inflammation in the body like crazy. It's so effective, but you have to know where you stand before you can make the changes. Another test that I like to do is checking your cortisol pattern and inflammatory markers and your hormone pathways. We not only just kind of look at where the hormones are, but then look at how are you clearing them? How are your detox patterns going? If you are not detoxing properly, if you're not able to clear all the excess estrogen, things like that, you're going to feel inflamed. You're going to have a hard time getting into fat stores to lose weight. You're going to have a hard time with your energy and clearing out the brain fog. So those are really important markers to know. Again, reach out if that's something you want to look at. I can get you access to that and start to know where you stand once and for all. And then let's look at this thyroid specific labs beyond the TSH. The TSH is called the thyroid stimulating hormone. It really is just an indicator of how the pituitary is communicating with the thyroid. Okay, the pituitary in your brain is the master gland. I would say the thyroid is the other master gland, but the pituitary dictates what's happening down here in the thyroid. And if it's elevated, it means you have a sluggish thyroid. If it's low, it means you have an overactive thyroid. And then somewhere in between is sort of debatable of where that needs to be. So optimal ranges are very different than normal lab ranges. And this is where the frustrating part happens. You feel like garbage, you go to the doctor, they test your TSH, maybe your T4, they fall into normal range, they send you on your way saying nothing is wrong. Meanwhile, you are miserable, okay? This is the problem. And this is why we need more specific thyroid labs, including free T3, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, the thyroid peroxidase or TPO antibodies, as well as the thyroglobulin antibodies. These are so important to have at least once. Get them once so you have a baseline so you can see where you're at and be able to address it, okay? Those are so important. And again, that reverse T3, I want to talk about that in a second. When I was feeling probably my absolute worst and I was desperate to figure out what it was and I was dialing in my nutrition, still wasn't quite there. And then I was doing different things with my nutrition. I was starting to get better. There's just a couple, like one missing link, and it turned out to be the one missing link. And that was I did a more specific lab and for thyroid, and I saw that my reverse T3 was 357. Normal is 25 or below. Optimal is between say 9 and 12. Okay, I was 357. So what that told me is that the Synthroid that I was taking, that was at a high dose to suppress the cancer, was not being converted into free T3, the active thyroid hormone. Instead, it was being converted into the reverse T3 and just sitting there and not doing anything to help me out. And that's why I still felt like garbage, even though I was taking the T4. It's assumed by conventional wisdom that your body is perfectly able to take the T4 in medication form or your own thyroid form and convert it into T3. That is the breakdown. And that process doesn't happen because of stress, because of blood sugar, because of gut health, because of just other chronic inflammation, chronic, like infection or like the EBV type of thing. That causes the breakdown in that. And that is why I was feeling like garbage no matter what. I was working out, I was eating well, I was taking my medicine, I was doing all of those things, and it did not matter. So that's why we have to look beyond the TSH. And then what's really important to do is to be very mindful of your symptoms and really look to connect your own dots. I know it's kind of a pain to journal your symptoms, but I recommend it all the time. When people start my programs, I'm always telling them to track their symptoms, even if it's just once a week, and you start to make patterns and make connections. You can do it more often if you want, but to make it as easy as possible, start on Sunday nights and put a bullet point list of all the symptoms you feel, even if you've had it for 10 years, 5 years, whatever, put it down. And then as you work through the process, when you're working with me one-on-one, when you're working with my group program, whatever it is, you can see the differences and in the improvements that you're making and how that is affecting in a positive way those symptoms that you've been feeling even for a long time, even if they have been there for a long time. So you just want to also take note of if you have any kind of history of infection, mold exposure, what's going on in your stress. Are you chronically stressed? Do you have major life things happening? Remember that the biggest life stressors are moving, job loss, death, divorce, and illness. Those are the main things. And if you are struggling with this chronic, undiagnosed, whatever is going on with you, whatever those symptoms are, that is so stressful because you become your own investigator. You become your own practitioner to figure it out, and it is chronically stressful, right? So what you need to do is tie all that together over a period of time, and you're going to see the patterns. You're going to notice if you're worse in the morning. You're going to notice if you're worse after eating a certain thing. You're going to notice how you feel during the time of your cycle, whatever it is. You're going to start noticing the patterns, and you're going to be able to put stuff together, right? You're going to have to get to feel better after making changes that are specific to your specific process. Not everybody feels the exact same way. That's why not everybody can do the exact same thing to get better. All right, so what can we do with nutrition, lifestyle, and supplement strategies to support the reduction of this inflammation that also supports your thyroid health? Okay, so I'm going to go through about 5 things here to give you, there's a lot, there's so much to each one of these, but I'm going to give you the highlights. We need to look at kind of a foundation of an anti-inflammatory diet. So if you have a thyroid condition, probably you should eliminate gluten. Okay, probably I see that on lab tests show up all the time. It's just an inflammatory thing, especially in the autoimmune setting of a thyroid condition. And so that is something that I would eliminate, or at best, like really restrict, and this is even if you have, or if you don't have celiac disease, right? This is just because of the inflammatory nature of the gluten and how that affects people with thyroid conditions. So other people do really well if they remove dairy, and that's, I think, a little bit more situationally. Soy is another, inflammatory trigger for people with thyroid conditions. If you're doing a lot of added sugar, like processed, like ultra processed foods, especially, which also contain seed oils. And I know that there's a kind of a thing about that. There are, dietitians all over social media saying that seed oils aren't a big deal. It's no big deal. Just, whatever. And it's not true. If we have in our country, we have so many more omega-6s, which are going to be more inflammatory in the ratio compared to omega-3s because of our highly processed foods. And no one can argue that our highly processed foods are actually healthy for us if we're eating them all the time. So we have this overabundance of omega-6s to omega-3 ratio, and it's inflammatory. It just is. So try to remove that. If you're already reducing your processed and packaged foods, you're just naturally reducing your seed oils. All right, emphasizing whole foods. We need to really think about, what are animal proteins going to be? What are plant proteins going to be? Look at our greens, include things like bone broth, cruciferous vegetables, especially, make sure that they're high quality and potentially cooked, even roasted or steamed just a little bit to help for that concern about goitrogens and thyroid. You'd have to eat a lot of these to cause an issue, daily over lots of time, but, just to be safe, be on the safe side, you can cook them a little bit and have some raw here and there, no big deal. Make sure you're including a lot of high antioxidant foods. So this is like blueberries or any berry, actually, turmeric, ginger, rosemary. Those types of things are going to be really supportive of the body because they're protecting it. That's what antioxidants do. And then making sure that with every meal, you are balancing your meal with protein, fat, and fiber each time you eat those main meals, especially. That will help balance your blood sugar, which will then tamp down inflammation, which is the name of the game. The second thing, and this is probably the biggest thing, you need to heal the gut. Need to heal the gut. And it's not just as easy as take a probiotic, the trendy probiotic that's out there. That is not usually going to be enough. You have to dig deep. Do we have pathogens growing in there? Do we have an overabundance of some microbes and an underabundance of others? Is there an imbalance in your gut? You need to look at things like, can you tolerate fermented foods? If you eat sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, and you feel really bloated and you feel sick or whatever, that's a sign that, you probably have a histamine thing going on. There's too many bugs in there that are causing a reaction that way. So we need to figure out what that is. That's why the gut testing is really, really important to do. And again, you can do a lot by just really cleaning up your diet and starting to heal it that way before you do any kind of testing. Then we need to support our detox pathways. That's going to be staying hydrated. That's going to be exercising. Make sure you're sweating, making sure that you are, breathing hard, breathing heavy here and there, getting your heart rate up, dry brushing. That's another thing. Making sure that you use electrolytes. Like you can even put lemon water, or make lemon water and get some sea salt in there. Take some electrolytes, and making sure that you're getting the B vitamins and the magnesium and the protein to be able to go through all the phases of detox. I'm not going to go through that today. Then this is a big one. We need to manage our stress, which goes along with sleeping. You need to sleep in order to actually tamp down inflammation. So if you are regulating your cortisol because your stress is managed, you're going to be reducing inflammation just naturally. And I would say this is one of the hardest things for people to do because it takes some discipline with your schedule throughout the day. So I always recommend to start out with some kind of mind-body practices, meditation, breath work, journaling. You can double dip. If you're going to journal symptoms, that can be your kind of journaling for Sunday nights, right? That you're just downtime. Even if it's getting into reading for pleasure, just like maybe right before bed or right away in the morning, just some downtime where you're just being for even 5 minutes off your phones, off the TV, off your computer, and just sitting and being, that is going to be helpful for managing your stress. And you need to develop some kind of sleep wake routine so you have some consistency. We really need you to sleep between 7 and 9 hours. And I know that's really hard. I don't know why that's hard. Sometimes I think I'm getting there pretty easily. And I'm like, oh, I went to bed pretty early last night. It should be good. And then I've only slept for, 6.5 hours or something like that. So it's hard to do, but you have to have a consistent routine, even on the weekends, if possible, to make that happen. You can use different types of adaptogens like ashwagandha. Sometimes that's controversial with thyroid patients. Rhodiola, holy basil, there's different kinds of teas with those adaptogens in it. And that adaptogen is just in the name. It helps you adapt to the stressors, biochemically adapt. And then here's the thing. Supplementation. I struggle with this sometimes because I see how supplements can be really beneficial for people and really support people and their symptoms. But what I don't like is people just like throw like spaghetti at the wall and just try all the things and take all of them without really any rhyme or reason. And a lot of times people are taking things because they hear that someone took it and it felt good, or some doctor on a podcast told them to take it, but maybe it doesn't apply to their situation. So I always think less is more. And if you've been taking things for a long time and kind of not sure if it's even working for you, I recommend doing sort of a supplement fast, sort of pull back one supplement at a time to see if you notice, like if I pull this out, I've been taking it for a year or two, do I feel worse? And if you do, then maybe you put it back in. Kind of check yourself so you're not taking all the things, because if you're not detoxing properly, if your gut isn't healthy, all those supplements don't really probably help that much. You got to get those other things dialed in first and then take a very targeted and specific supplement protocol for your specific needs. So, just off the top, probably wouldn't hurt to take a really robust multivitamin, if you're not sure what to take and you feel like you need to support something. If your gut is really bad, you can't keep anything in your gut, then I would not waste the time or money on supplementation. But you want something that's a really robust multi that has selenium and zinc and vitamin D, magnesium, things like that. You probably want to do omega-3s to get that inflammation down, a really high quality fish oil, and I can help you with all of that. I give discounts at my supplement store all the time. And then one of the things that helps with detoxing and making sure that process goes well are going to be something called NAC, N-acetylcysteine, and that is a really good precursor for detoxing at the cellular level. So that would be some good basics to help with the things that we talked about here. All right, so if you have any questions, always reach out. I love to communicate with people and to help people out as much as I can. And if you're looking ever at wanting to get into this a lot more in depth and really figure things out once and for all, reach out. Let's have a conversation. And, I would love to help you out. There's so many things we can do, so many different versions of the way that I work that will help you feel and function like a normal human being, even if you felt like this for a really long time. So reach out. Again, my name is Tiffany. If you haven't followed me, or if this is the first time you're seeing me, Tiffany at rockbottomwellness.com. You can reach me there, or just comment below in the video and I will reach out and we can have a conversation. All right.